The silence didn't just wake Maya. It screamed her awake. It was the unnatural, suffocating quiet that follows an explosion, the kind that presses in on your eardrums and makes the hairs on your arms stand rigid. She sat bolt upright, drenched in cold sweat, the memory of their rowdy arrival, the crunch of tires, the shouted laughter mocking her from the oppressive void. She scrambled to the front window. The world outside had been erased. Where the packed gravel service road, their lifeline, their tether to civilization, had been less than 8 hours ago, a towering, impenetrable wall of old-growth pine now stood. The trees weren't just covering the path. They were rooted directly into it, their thick black bark oozing sap onto ground that should have been tire-marked earth. It was a forest that had materialized, whole and hostile, during the night. But the real shock was the view through the back window, the view over the lake. The water was a flat, glassy black. And the light, God, the light. The sky was not dawn. It was a grotesque, psychedelic sunset, bleeding toxic tangerine and livid violet over the horizon. The sun hung too low, too large, pulsing like a wound. It was impossible. She spun, checking the clock, 7:30 a.m. It was morning, but the cabin itself was bathed in the light of an alien dying planet. The ground beneath the floorboards groaned, a sound too deep and organic to be mere wood settling. The cabin wasn't sheltering them, it was digesting them, and the woods were simply its infinitely folding, impossibly vast stomach. There is no escape. Only surrender to the truth that the world they knew died in their sleep. What is the one thing you would sacrifice to see the sun rise correctly just one last time? If you're already checking the windows for strange light, tell us your name and city in the comments. Maya didn't wait for the floorboards to finish their groan. She lunged across the small, freezing room, gripping Nick's shoulder and shaking him hard. "Nick, wake up! Now!" "Now," he mumbled a protest, his eyes slits against the morning gloom, but the raw terror in Maya's voice cut through his sleep instantly. He sat up, his hair sticking to his forehead. "What is it? What happened? The road." "Look." She didn't have the breath to say more, simply pointing with a trembling finger. Nick, usually methodical and calm, didn't argue. He moved to the front window, pulled the moth-eaten curtain aside, and froze. The silence that had assaulted Maya now gripped him, deafening in its lack of natural rhythm. He stared at the dense, unnervingly still wall of pine. "No," he whispered, a sound utterly devoid of his usual confidence. He reached out and pressed his palm flat against the glass, as if expecting to feel the roughness of asphalt beneath the pane. "No, that's not possible. The car was right there. I parked it facing out, 10 feet from the porch railing. I even covered the hood." He tried to rationalize, the frantic energy of denial replacing his shock. Maybe we came in further down the track than we thought. Maybe there's a small loop. Or maybe the forest floor is just damp and absorbed the tracks? "Nick," Maya's voice was dangerously low, a fragile thread of sanity. "I saw your cairn. You remember setting the stones? They were right by the tire tracks." The little pile of river stones they'd made as a marker was gone. There was only the endless, seamless weave of roots and dark earth. Before Nick could formulate a plan, the thin walls separating the bedrooms from the main area amplified a sudden, sharp noise, the creak of Chloe's bed springs, followed by the louder, metallic snap of Liam's laptop case closing. Liam was the first out, rubbing his eyes and wearing the smug, superior look of a man who believed the wilderness could be solved with a Wikipedia article. Chloe followed, holding a blanket around herself, her eyes wide and already brimming with anticipated dread. "What's with the vibe?" "Did a bear get in the trash?" Liam asked, trying to sound jovial. "No," Nick said, his back still to the front window, his voice cracked. "The road's gone." Liam scoffed. "Hilarious, Nick. Did you hide the keys?" "Look, I need to check the weather. My phone is still saying no service, which is fine, but I want to get the local forecast." As Liam fumbled for his phone, Chloe drifted toward the back window, drawn by the strange luminescence washing the room in sickly orange and purple hues. She gasped, dropping the blanket. "What is that sky?" she whispered, not in fear, but pure, stunned disbelief. "It's like an oil slick. That's not normal, guys. That's not a weather system." "It's a trick of the light," Liam declared, finally looking up. "It's 7,000 a.m., Liam." "The sun is that way," Maya screamed, pointing at the front wall of pine where the sunrise should have been hitting the eastern side of the cabin. "And what's out the side window?" Liam, agitated, moved to the narrow window beside the fireplace, pulling aside the small, checkered drape. He inhaled sharply, dropping his phone, a heavy, resounding clatter that seemed inappropriately loud in the oppressive quiet. There's water," he choked out, his eyes glued to the pane. "A coastline. Look." Maya and Nick moved swiftly to stand behind him. The cabin was built deep in the mountainous interior, hundreds of miles from any ocean. Yet just 30 feet away, beyond a small patch of marsh grass, was a stretch of white, wind-whipped sand, ending abruptly at a cold, gray sea. Waves crashed against the shore, and a sharp, salty tang, a smell entirely absent from the landlocked air moments before, seemed to momentarily seep through the glass. The front of the cabin led into an eternal forest. The back faced a cosmic twilight. The side faced a tempestuous, impossible ocean. "We're not in the woods," Chloe sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "We're not anywhere. We're unmoored." Nick turned from the terrifying view, his face white, his eyes darting quickly from Maya to Liam to Chloe. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for a liar. "Who moved the car?" he demanded, his voice cracking with the first surge of sheer, irrational paranoia. "Tell me who drove us out here and changed the road to trees." The first crack in their trust had appeared, and the cabin watched, waiting for the fracture to spread. Nick's accusation hung in the stale, pressurized air, but it was too absurd to stick. Liam, recovering his phone, pointed at the front door. "We need to get out there, not debate who's losing their mind. We have to walk the perimeter, mark the trees. We'll find the road. It has to be 20 feet further in. The perspectives are just messed up." "No," Chloe whispered, her eyes fixed on the ocean view. "It's the cabin. It's what's real. Everything outside is just scenery." Maya, however, was already moving. She grabbed the heaviest tool they'd brought, a small, rusted hatchet from the woodshed, and shoved it into the back of her jeans. "We're not staying here to find out what the sunset looks like on the other side. Liam, you and I go out the front. Nick, Chloe, stay here. Keep eyes on the cabin. If anything changes, even a shadow, you scream." The group reluctantly agreed, desperate for action over analysis. As Maya unlocked the front door, the silence outside intensified, now tasting metallic and sterile. The instant the latch clicked, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Liam shouldered the door open. The air hit them, not cold, but dense, like walking through chilled honey. Liam took one step onto the porch and stopped dead. Wait, he muttered, pulling out his phone. He opened the camera. "I need proof. I need a recording." He aimed the camera at the dense wall of pine. On the screen, the image was perfectly clear, an ordinary, if unnaturally close, forest. He hit record, panning slowly left to right. He looked up, confirming the view with his own eyes. Liam whipped around, but before he could react, the ground beneath his feet shifted. Not a tremor, but a subtle, sickening slide. The dirt beneath the porch rail was suddenly replaced by something rougher, colder. "The stairs!" Maya yelled, leaping back inside. The 2 wooden steps leading from the porch down to the earth were gone. In their place sat a single, massive boulder of igneous rock, striated with veins of black crystal they hadn't seen before, impossible to climb down. It looked like the cabin had just been plucked from one state park and dropped onto a high-altitude geological site. Liam glanced frantically at his phone. The recording had stopped. He checked the screen. The camera app was still open, but the last frame captured was a close-up of the front door's wooden grain. The video of the wall of trees was simply not there. "It's deleting the evidence," he whispered, stepping back inside and slamming the door shut with a resounding, terrified clang. Chloe was pointing hysterically at the back window, tears streaming down her face. The terrifying sunset sky was gone. In its place, stretching to the horizon, was a landscape of barren, endless ice and jagged black mountains. The light was a dull steel gray, and the overwhelming scent of salt water was instantly replaced by the sterile, biting smell of polar air. The side window, which had shown the sea, now contained a thick, swirling reddish-brown fog, impenetrable and silent. 30 seconds, Nick breathed, his voice flat with horror. The world outside the cabin changes every 30 seconds, and it's not just the view, it's the geology. He walked to the center of the room, looking at the ceiling, then the floor. This cabin is the only thing anchored. It's the eye of the storm. We can't step outside. If we do, we cease to exist in the same reality as this structure. Maya looked at the boulder blocking the front door, at the hatchet in her waistband. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. "We have food for 3 days, water from the pump, if it still works. We have to find out why this thing is anchored to us. This cabin has a secret, and if we don't find it, the outside is going to fold in on us completely." She walked to the fireplace, ignoring the reddish-brown fog outside the window, and reached her hand deep into the sooty, cold chimney. She was looking for something hidden, something ancient, something that had decided their reality should be its plaything. Liam stood paralyzed, staring at his useless phone, while Nick and Chloe avoided each other's eyes, the paranoia of the missing car already poisoning the well of their shared terror. They were alone, locked inside a tiny, unreliable island floating in an ocean of impossible realities. Maya's fingers scraped against brick and cold soot, but then they caught on something smooth, alien to the rough masonry. With a grunt, she wrenched it free. It was a small, carved wooden figure, a man perpetually shielding his eyes, his mouth open in a soundless scream. Etched into the base was a single date, 7/16/19. Nick saw the date and staggered back. It was the night of the accident, the night they hit the deer but drove away, leaving a sound they couldn't distinguish from a human cry in the dark. "Liam, what were you looking up last night?" Maya demanded, clutching the carving. Liam, shame etched across his face, pointed to his laptop. The screen was still on, displaying a forum dedicated to reality anchors and psychic prisons. "Was checking on her," Liam admitted, his voice hollow. "We were never here for a vacation. We were here because this area, this cabin, is famous for anchoring intense, shared guilt. They call it a sanctuary of reciprocity. It draws people consumed by a mutual secret." "It's not a cabin," Chloe whispered, suddenly calm. "It's a manifestation. It's the only place our minds agree is real. And the outside? It's our fractured guilt." Nick ran to the front window. The massive boulder was gone. The front porch steps led not to the dense pine wall, but to a sheer, endless drop into black, swirling mist. "We're running out of time." "We're separating," Nick yelled. "What does it want?" Maya looked at the terrified carving, then at her 3 friends, all bound by the night of the accident, all desperate to erase the guilt. The carving is the key, the anchor. To stop the shifting, it needs one of us to accept the guilt, to become the final, permanent anchor of the memory. The walls of the cabin began to visibly ripple, the wooden beams flexing like wet paper. The windows were no longer distinct scenes. They were blurry, clashing colors, desert sand, volcanic ash, deep ocean blue, 100 realities fighting for dominance. Chloe screamed again, but this time it was a sound of agonizing acceptance. She seized the hatchet from Maya's belt before anyone could react. "It was me!" Chloe shrieked, tears and sweat carving paths through the soot on her face. "I was driving!" "I take it!" Before the others could grab her, Chloe plunged the hatchet deep into the floorboard at the exact center of the room, right where Nick had stood moments before. A thunderclap, dry and deafening, cracked through the cabin. The walls instantly ceased rippling. The air solidified. The impossible views outside the windows snapped into the same picture. a familiar dark forest, dripping wet, under a perfectly normal cloudy gray morning sky. It was stone, fusing Chloe's hand, the wood, and the earth beneath into a single, permanent slab. Chloe stood paralyzed, her eyes glassy and distant, a faint, contented smile on her lips. She had become the anchor. The other three watched in silent horror as the familiar crunch of tires, the blessed sound of a car approaching the now restored road, drifted into the cabin. They were free. But they were only three. The cabin had found its permanent resident, leaving three survivors who would never again trust the stability of the ground beneath their feet. What unresolved truth do you carry that could anchor a nightmare? If this ending chills you, tell us your name and city in the comments below. If you survived the journey, please like and subscribe for more terrifying tales.